Okay, hello everybody, good evening. Thank you everybody for being online. Thank you for your patience, for waiting for the stream. I'll just wait for my team to confirm that we are online and that everybody can hear us. So I'm just gonna wait a couple of minutes before I get the confirmation from my team. Um, yeah, okay, so yeah, we're good to go. So thank you everybody for being online. Good evening to you. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about TCS NQT, TCS Ninja. So some of the you all of you have some doubts, some questions about how to prepare, what to prepare. So we're going to cover all of that. But just one more thing I just wanted to say was congratulations to everybody who cleared the first round of Code Vita. We have got some really good news that many of the colleges who had taken up the Edyst course, who had partnered with Edyst, are seeing twice the number of people clear Code Vita. There are people who last year had a certain number, this year have twice the number of people clearing. So we're very happy for that, and just want to congratulate everybody who's cleared the first round of Code Vita, and those who haven't, and even of those of you who have, make sure that you give Ninja and NQT, and that's also another brilliant opportunity for all of you. So without much delay, let's get started. I'll just want to repeat a couple of things that I mentioned last time. So I just what I'd mentioned last time was that was yesterday, was that the registrations for Ninja have not yet stopped. So you can still register for Ninja right now, by going to the next step portal. If you have not, then please go and do it. And it's not as simple as just registering. You have to click on this thing called apply for drive. You have to click on this thing called apply for drive, otherwise you will not be considered for Ninja or NQT. If you don't do this, right, if you don't do it, then your hall ticket may not be available. So you need to get a hall ticket to apply for NQT, and to do that you have to click apply for drive. So if you didn't do this on the next step portal, please go talk to your placement office right now and see what has to be done, what needs to be done, because without that you are not going to get into NQT. The application deadline is revised to 24th July. So everybody, treat today as the last day. You have tomorrow, but treat today as the last day and register yourself. Really, it's a brilliant opportunity. Don't miss out just because you didn't register. So double check, triple check whether you've registered properly, because there are so many people who apply that if you miss out, very few people are going to come back to you and say, why did you miss out? Let us do another test for you. Nobody is going to do all of that for you. Okay. All right, so the next thing is, let's just revise over what is exactly the pattern of NQT. And in NQT, unlike Code Vita, there is more than one round. That is, in Code Vita we only had coding, but in NQT you have more things also, but still coding is the most important thing. So if you look at it, the total number of marks in the entire thing is 78 as per last year's format. But as per this year, we are not really sure what will happen, but let's say they follow last year's format. 30 marks were given to coding, and you had English, quants, programming, MCQs also. So really it's, if you know coding, there is 43 marks up for grabs for you. Make sure that you're really good at your coding skills before you go for NQT. I always keep saying that English and quants, you can still practice a little bit before, let's say about 2-3 days or 4 days before the exam, and you can still crack this. But coding is something you won't be able to crack just before the exam. That's why they even give you 30 minutes to complete one simple code. So if you don't do the coding or the MCQs, then you're definitely not going to get through, because the people, if you look at this, is 43 marks. If you're not able to do this, then you're definitely not going to get through. Even if, let's say, you miss out a little bit on English and quants, if you did this well, there's a decent chance that you can get through. Okay, so that's one of the things that we were discussing. And so in this coding round, before I go ahead and talk about the coding rounds, I also want you to to tell you that while you are doing the questions, while you're attempting the exam, please make sure you read the instructions. Especially read the instructions here. Okay, the reason for reading the instructions over here is, if you don't read the instructions here, you might miss out on some of the rules for negative marking. So what happens generally is TCS will on the spot, or they will give you sections like this quant section is there. maybe 10 questions will be non-negative marking and 10 will be negative marking. Read the instructions very carefully before attempting, because you might think, oh okay, this is a non-negative marking question, let me just guess it, but it might have a negative marks of 2 marks or something. So make sure you read the question properly before you even go ahead to attempt it. Especially the section instructions is something you have to read definitely, otherwise you might just attempt a negative mark question without full confidence. So these change as the rounds change. So probably this year they'll introduce some other negative marking, so please make sure that you read the question, read the section properly, and then go ahead and do it. Okay. All right. So as we were discussing yesterday, we went through a lot of last year's TCS NQT questions, and generally we found these 4 or 5 topics to be there that if you know them well, there's a really good chance you can just clear the coding round and the MCQ rounds. So these 5 topics are the one that they are generally focusing on. In fact, even in arrays, the topics are mainly things like sorting, searching like binary search, or merge sort, a selection sort, quick sort, insertion sort. So basically from your subjects, there's nothing new over here. They're not going to ask you to write a custom sorting function. In maths, which we'll take up a question again today, in maths it will be again very simple formulas. In conditionals, we saw yesterday a question like leap year. Again, if you know your conditionals properly, then these kind of questions become quite easy. Loops and patterns, these are really famous questions from Code Vita. So you might be asked to do a pattern like a pyramid like this. So like let's say the input is 3, you have to print 3 rows of this pyramid, or you might have to print out the factorial of a number, which is the question we're going to do today. But factorial of a number is something that you could be asked to print out. So these are again basic questions, not high algorithms. There are not algorithms, very difficult algorithms are not there, right? We don't have any of that. We have some very basic questions, some that might have been asked in your subjects. You just have to be very careful and do the questions. Apart from that, it's not too difficult. But I know that most of you, especially from the non-CSE branches, may not have the correct experience of programming. So for example, these are some of the languages that are allowed, but I know most of you will just right now be confident either on C or C++. So you're just confident on this, and even then in your first year, you might have studied a little bit of C, where you know scanf, you know printf, you know probably if else, plus plus minus operators, you probably know for loop, while loop, you may know arrays, right? So you might know all of these things. Let me tell you that all of these things are crucial for you to know. If you don't know this, then you're clearing the NQT rounds will become difficult. So please make sure that you revise on all of these topics. And in fact, that's specifically why on the Edyst platform we had created a warm-up section for you. So let me just show that to you. So that's specifically why we've created this warm-up section, so that you can actually warm up on all of the topics. So just to give you an example, nested loops, arrays, 2D arrays, these are a little bit more advanced, but the simple warm-up would be, how do you take a simple input, how do you do some conditionals, how do you do loops, those kind of things. So do the warm-up, and in fact the first warm-up is completely free for you. So the first warm-up is completely free for you, and Divya has already completed that, so congrats to her. But the first warm-up is completely free. Please just go ahead and access the first warm-up, and try to see what's your level of programming, whether you are up to date or not, because these are just the warm-up 1, warm-up 2. Then we have the actual TCS previous year's questions. So 1 second. Yeah, so then we have the actual TCS previous year's questions also. So make sure that you are practicing the warm-up 1 and warm-up 2 before you go ahead for the previous year's questions. Those of you, all of those students who know very little, that is you're just coming to 4th year and now you've realized, oh, I've not done programming too much, that is the warm-up 1 and warm-up 2 is really geared for you. It doesn't matter if you don't know Java, if you don't know Python, it's completely fine. As even if you're good at C, it's also okay. as long as you're able to do these concepts. That's what you need to do. You don't need to be able to write in Java or Python. They're not checking which language you're good at. They're just checking whether you're good at programming or not. So if you're good at Java, please stick to Java. If you're good at C, please stick to C. Don't try to learn a new language right now. All right. So yeah, so let's come to what our question today is, and the question that we're going to discuss today is one of the first questions anybody learns in programming, but the tragedy is it's not understood by everybody very well. So I'll be trying to explain to you how to find the factorial of a number. And before we even go to the code, let's just look at what's the logic of a factorial. Like what do you even mean by a factorial? So a factorial is represented by this exclamation mark, and a 4 factorial is the multiplication of 4 with all of the numbers less than it up until 1. So you'll have 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, which is equal to 4 into 3 is 12, 12 into 2 is 24, so it will be 24. For 6, what would it be? 6 into 5, 30, 30 into 4, 120, 120 into 3, 360, 360 into 2, 720. So it would be 720. And by convention, 0 factorial is equal to 1. So the factorial is only there for all positive numbers, and 0 factorial is equal to 1, and every other number keeps going back all the way up to 1. Right? So we have this is the formula, and while you might have done this in your +1, +2 and you think this is simple, what we have to do is implement it in programming. So we have to implement the code for it. So for those of you who've been following this series back in Code Vita as well as yesterday's NQT lecture, you will know that whenever you're given a coding question, the number one rule, then the golden rule that you have is don't code. Whenever you have to start, never start with the code. Don't code first. You have to eventually code, obviously, because it's a coding question, but don't code first. Always start with the logic. So we have to start with logic always. All right, that's what we have to do. And so in this case, while to us it seems very easy, like if you do 10 factorial, it will be 10 into 9 into 8 into 7 into 6 into 5. That seems simple enough to us. But how do we make the computer understand it? Remember, the computer is actually a dumb machine. It only does what you tell it to do. Don't think that it will figure out things by itself. I've seen people actually try to do something like this, where they'll type print factorial, and they'll say that, yeah, computer should know how to print the factorial. Don't think that. What you should think is, how do I make the computer understand in a language that the computer understands? So we have to somehow convert the code, or convert our logic into code that the computer can understand, right? So just coming back, what exactly do I mean by this? That how do we start with we don't go with the code first, we have to start with logic. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at the question, right? So the question says, if we have given 4, we have to multiply 4 with 3 and 2 and 1, right? And similarly for 5, we have to multiply with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you look at it, actually, instead of going backward, try to think of it like this. We are given a number, like any number, let's say n, and we have to multiply all the numbers from 1 up until that number. So it would be 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into so on up until we reach n, right? That's what we have to do. So let's say if the number is 5, then we have 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5. If the number is 3, then we just have 1 into 2 into 3. If you think of it like this, then the question becomes slightly simpler, because if you're used to the for loop is used to count up from one number up to another number. That's one of the simplest, most basic codes that we have done with a for loop. So if we know how to use a for loop, we can start from 1, keep going up until a number. Now, how do we calculate and store the factorial? We'll just come to that. But at least we know that we can start from 1 and we can go up till any number n. Right, so we know that we can do this because we've done this before with a for loop. Like, very simply put, if I do for int I equals to 1, I less than equal to n, I plus plus. So over here, I've generated all of the numbers from 1 up until n. So at least those numbers are generated over here. That's at least we've done that. Now, how do we actually store the factorial? Let's come to it. But we've at least done this part. So what I'm going to show to you is a pattern which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. So this pattern is when we want to loop through things and we want to save the previous result always. Okay, and so the rule for this is, if you want to take the previous result, that is the result from the previous iteration, right? So let's say you did something, you got some result for a value 1, right? Let's say there's some result. You want to make sure that in value 2 you will take this result, add something, or increase this value by some amount, and that becomes some result 2. And then for iteration 3 you want to again make it like result 3 or something, but this result 3 has some values from 2. What do I mean by this? Let's say we have over here 1, right? Factorial of 1 is 1. When we come to 2, we want to take this 1 and multiply it by 2, so we will get 2. When we come to 3, we want to take this 2, that is we need the previous factorial value, and then when we multiply it by 3 we will get 6. Similarly, when we come to 4, we have to store the previous factorial value, the 3 value, and then we multiply 4 by 6, we will get 24, and so on. So this pattern has a name, but you don't really need to get into that. But what it tells us is at every given point we need to store the previous value. Now in this also there are two types. If you have to store the previous value, which is a sum, or it could be a multiplication. In our case it's a multiplication because it's a factorial. But if it's a sum, then you will start your sum with the value 0. If it's a multiplication, you will start it with 1. Why? Let's say you're taking the sum of the first n numbers. So instead of doing 1 into 2 into 3, that is over here you'll do 1 into 2 into 3, so on. What we want to do is 1 plus 2 plus 3 and so on, right? Initially you'll keep your sum to be 0. When you come to 1, you will take the 0 sum and then you will add it to 1. Then you will take 2, you will take whatever the sum was with 1 and you will add it. It will become 3. Over here, if you take the initial value as 0, then when you come to 1, you multiply 0 with 1, you will get 0. If you take 2, if you multiply 0 with 2, you will again get 0. So this is not a good approach for multiplication. Instead, had we taken over here 1, so let's just cut out this one. So if we had just taken over here 1, then 1 into 1 is 1, 1 into 2 is 2, and so on. So to preserve the previous value, or to just keep the previous value, we always, when we're doing sum, we take 0. When we're doing multiplication, we do 1. Now this might sound very, very basic to some of you, but I know there are a lot of people in the audience who are still doing programming after a long time, and this kind of revision is really good for you. So let's come to the pseudocode for this particular thing. What we have to do right now is we just have to define, we have to take it as 1, and once we have it as 1, for each of the for loop, so if you remember, we have the for loop over here. For each iteration in the for loop, we're just going to multiply that I into the factorial. So this is what the pseudocode would look like. First we take input n, and where we have to find n factorial, so this is that input. Then fact or factorial is equal to 1, and we will keep accumulating or storing or multiplying all our numbers from 1 up until n into this fact. So for I from for I from 1 to n, fact is equal to fact into I, not 1, sorry for that, but it's fact into I, right? So that's what we have over here. Now let's just, whenever you're given a code like this, don't always say yeah, I understood. Try to substitute the values. Let's say n is equal to 4, right? So let's do something for I, fact, right, and n. Let's take, always do this on your pen and paper. Let's say I from 1 to n, right? So let's say I is 1, fact is 1 right now, fact is equal to fact into I, right? So fact becomes 1. Then when I becomes 2, n over n is 4 right now, when I becomes 2, fact is equal to fact into I. So fact was 1, 1 into 2 will be 2, n is still 4 because n is not changing. Then what do we have? Let me just adjust so that you can all see. 1 second. Yeah. So then what do we have over here? We have I becomes 3. We have fact as 2, 2 into 3, fact then becomes 6, n still is 4. Then I becomes 4, 6 into 4, 24, and then Over here n is still 4, and now I has reached n. So this kind of a table you should have for any of the pseudocodes that you're doing, any of the logic you're doing. You should always have the pseudocode with you. Like I was saying yesterday, if you have 30 minutes that you have right now in your coding questions, your first 10 minutes should not really be about coding, because the level of these questions is that once you get the logic, the code will come out really quickly. So the first 10 minutes has to be completely focused on the logic, then go to the code. And really, I'll just show you, it will become very simple for you right now. Let me just bring up the code, and I'll be coding this in C because I know most of you are comfortable in C. So let me just open it up and show you how it looks like in C, right, and how this question looks like. So just give it to me, give me a minute. So what we are going to do is we are going to go to the Edyst platform. In the Edyst platform over here, we'll go to TCS previous year's questions. In TCS previous year's questions, I'm just going to open Factorial. So I completed it just before the webinar, but let me show you how I did it. Okay. For one of the things that you should have by hearted right now is, in your language, what is the starting code. Like in C, this is the starting code. You must know this. You can't be thinking this during the exam. You should already know this. You shouldn't be thinking, oh, was it stdio, was it stdio.h, is it int main, is it void main. You should not be thinking this. Like if you're given a blank question, minimum this much within the first 5 seconds you should be able to write and just finish. Okay. The next thing that the question says is, given a number n, print the factorial of the number. So we just have to take input n and print its factorial. First we initialize n, so it's int n. Then we do the scanning, so we do scanf mod d and n, and this is the way you take input in C. But you can also take input in C++ in a different way, in Java in a different way, in a Python in a different way. Focus on your language. If you're a C person, focus on this. If you're a Python person, focus on your specific language. Don't try to figure out why the syntax is like this, and all of that. Focus on your language and find the answer. Now, what we're going to do is we also need a factorial. This is what is going to store all our factorial numbers. Okay. Then what we'll do, for int I is equal to 1, I less than equal to n, I plus plus, because we need to start from 1, we need to take all of the numbers from 1 up until n, and we need to keep multiplying them into the factorial. So fact is equal to fact into I. That is what we're going to do over here, right? And once that is done, once we're done with this loop, we are going to print the factorial value, and let's give a new line after that. So those of you who remember, mod d tells that you have to print an integer, \n says you have to print the factorial, right? So sorry, \n says that you have to print a new line, not the factorial. So mod d says that you have to print the integer, and \n says that you have to give a new line. Okay. Now one question before you start. Hey, you told us that we have over here the factorial of numbers, but the number could also be 0, and 0 factorial has to be equal to 1. Is that being handled by this logic or not? Well, the best way to do is substitute the values. So let's substitute the values. Int n, scanf mod d and n, and over here what we have is, let's say n is 0. That's fine. Int factorial is equal to 1. Okay. For int I equal to 1, I less than equal to n. Is 1 less than equal to 0? No, it's not less than equal to 0. So it doesn't even enter this loop. And then we just print factorial, whose value was 1 anyways. So we're fine. 0 factorial also prints. And 1 factorial onwards, we checked our logic, it prints. So let's try to run this code, see if we are getting any errors, probably some compilation, runtime errors. You could get some of those. Okay, so our test cases are passed, and let's just submit it and see if it's working for all of the given test cases. All right, it's working for all of the test cases, and that's great. But again, in TCS NQT, it doesn't matter how many times you submit. Let's say you submitted this about 5 times, 10 times, it doesn't matter. Last year, no marks were cut for submitting again and again, and generally in any of the coding rounds, nobody cuts marks for submitting again and again. So let's say you didn't get it on your first try, don't worry. Keep trying to do more and more. You will be able to get it eventually. So let's just sum up what we have done today so far. So what we discussed right now was two very important things. One was we discussed the logic of factorial of a number, but also I shared this very interesting pattern with you, and the pattern is that if we are doing the sum, then you should always start with 0. If you're doing multiplication, you should always start with 1. And we do this pattern whenever from the previous iteration, like from 1 we need to take the result and carry it on into the next iteration. Similarly 3, we will want to carry on this iteration results over here, right? So whenever we want to carry on the iterations results of the previous one, we do something like fact is equal to fact into I, or sum is equal to sum plus I. What does this mean? The new value of factorial is equal to the old value of factorial into I. So this is quite difficult sometimes for students to understand. What does this mean, fact equals to fact into I? Like mathematically this doesn't make sense. No, what it is saying is take the old factorial value, multiply it with I, and then store this into the new factorial value, right? That's what it's trying to say. Then when it goes into the next loop, that new factorial value becomes the old factorial value. So two things we learned today. One was the factorial logic. The second one was how you have to use the previous result onto the next result. Just again another reminder for everybody, please register for the NQT or Next Step portal. You don't want to miss out on this just because you didn't register properly. Please click apply for drive to be eligible for it. Your hall ticket depends on that. Okay, and the action point for all of you is the campus recruitment drives are coming close. Even if you don't make it into NQT, you will still have a lot of other rounds to prepare for. So please make sure that you go to bit.ly /Edyst_CCP. That's what you have to do. Go to bit.ly /Edyst_CCP, and you will get all of the questions from the previous years. You will get all of the questions from the previous years and of the different companies. So let's say even if you didn't clear NQT, you'll still be able to get for Mindtree, you will be able to get for Wipro, you'll get for all of these. And let me just show you that. 1 second. Yeah, so you'll be able to get all of these tutorials. In fact, I urge all of you to check out the free tutorial, because you'll understand what are the most basics of programming that you should know. A lot of students think that one day batting, that is, hey, just 2 days before the exam I'm just going to sit and learn all of programming. Maybe with some topics of aptitude you might be able to do that also with some topics, but with programming you won't be able to do it. So please make sure that you at least try the free module of the warm-up, and then warm-up 2 and previous year's questions and so on. That depends on you, but please try the warm-up number 1, and we have all of these previous year's questions. I'm sure that many of you will also be appearing for AMCAT, for Mindtree. So start your preparation now, and that will be the best thing for you. The other thing about NQT I just wanted to say was, in NQT we have MCQs, so we will also be uploading some programming MCQs for you, so that you are able to crack the programming MCQs also. But the best way to get good at the programming MCQs is by writing a lot of programs, because you will start feeling like it's common sense that, oh, why don't we have a semicolon? Oh, obviously after for loop we don't have a semicolon. After for loop we have brackets. Like if you write your code, then this all things will become very, very easy for you to spotting the errors, giving the output. Practice on coding, these MCQ skills will automatically come. Having said that, we will help you with the MCQs also. We'll be uploading the programming MCQs shortly on the same course that I shared. So yes, with that, we're sort of done for today. I'll now be taking certain questions from the users. So whatever questions you have, please type it on the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions or doubts that you might have, right? So please let us know if there are any questions or doubts, and thank you all for waiting. I know in the start there was a little bit of a delay and things like that, so thanks all for waiting. All right, so I'm going to just wait for my team, and they're going to tell me what are the questions that we have right now. All right, yes.
Yeah, the first question, as always, we get is, there are many topics in which you have explained, which are expected by the students to practice. If we had to choose only 2 topics, what those 2 topics should be?
Okay, so there are many topics that students should prepare for, but if I had to choose only two topics, what are the two topics I should prepare for? First of all, you don't have to choose two topics because you have a lot of time for NQT. Please don't try to do this thing of I will prepare for only two topics or three topics. Please prepare for all topics. But just mathematically speaking, the major topics that you can cover right now are the programming topics. If you do programming MCQs and coding, you have more than 40 marks in your bag there and then. In fact, 30 marks of the coding is so sure shot that if you get the output, then you got the 30 marks. Like, I don't even think that there will be step marking or anything in that. It will be like 0 or 30. Maybe for some test cases you will get marks, but really, if you like, I've seen the level of the questions. If you just spend 10-15 days on the Edyst platform, there's a really good chance you'll get 30 on 30 in your programming question.
Okay. The next question is specific to the coding. They said when we write a code and run it and submit it, what is the whole story about test cases passing and not passing, and what are the minimum test cases to pass for it to get to be considered as a yes?
Right. So the question is that, when we write a code and there is a run and a submit, and sometimes in submit there are many test cases. So for example, in the question I did, there were about 5 test cases. So what is actually happening? Do I have to clear all of the test cases or not? Well, again, as I said earlier in the session, that TCS continues to change their pattern year by year. So generally speaking, if you've written your code well, you should be able to clear all of the test cases. There are 3 types of test cases. Okay, number one is the general case. So like today's question, there was 4 factorial, 5 factorial, 6 factorial. This is your general case test case. Now this general case test case you should pass, and majority of your test cases will be your general case test cases. And then there are 2 other type of test cases. One is like an invalid input test case. For example, we took input n, and n we assumed it will be an integer. But what if n is not an integer? What if the n given input is a string? What should you do that time? If the question mentions something and you did not implement it, for example, if the question says, if it's a string, print invalid input, and you did not do it, then there will be 1 or 2 test cases that you fail, and you might lose marks for that. The third type of test case is your own exceptions. For example, if I'm calculating the factorial right now in that factorial, somewhere I'm doing division and I end up doing division by 0. This has nothing to do with input. It has nothing to do with the test cases. But during that test case, somehow you make an error. So then you will also lose out on certain test cases. So this is generally the case with test cases. If you've written your logic well, like we did today, you will clear all of the test cases, and you should get the full marks.
We just attempted Code Vita, where we could go out to Google and do attribution. Can we do that here?
So in Code Vita, the question is, in Code Vita, people could just go online, search for the algorithms, and see and find out which is the correct algorithm. Do a lot of googling, and then based on attribution, you can just submit the code. Well, can we do that here is the question. Well, the answer is completely no. You cannot do that at all in NQT. First of all, NQT is, I'm not even sure if it's going to be like you can sit on your own laptop and do. You have to be at a center mostly, because you will be issued hall tickets. So you will not be able to do any of these things. You have to give the exam properly. It will be like a proper exam. So unlike Code Vita, you will not get a chance to do googling and all of that. But remember that here you are getting questions which are very straightforward questions. In Code Vita, you are getting questions that are like 2 or 3 levels deep. You had to find out some series, and then from that series you have to find out some formula. Here it's very simple. It's just factorial, it's just even or odd, it's just leap year, it's those kind of questions.
Okay. 3 very quick questions. This is asked by Binu Varghese. Do questions like Tower of Pisa come? Is that the level of thing? Will you be able to explain that to us?
Right. So Bino, hi Bino. I see him on the platform also daily. So keep up your preparation. You're doing good. So what Bino is asking is whether we will be covering patterns questions. Yeah. In fact, tomorrow's webinar will be on a patterns question. So we'll do a patterns question tomorrow, and I'll specifically if on the Edyst platform you can just share what you mean by Tower of Pisa, I'll be happy to cover on how you can do the Tower of Pisa part also. So yeah, we'll do patterns. Patterns have a very specific trick, and so if you are interested in knowing those tricks, just make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you'll get a notification on whenever we are launching the videos. So do subscribe. But there are 2-3 tricks. Now these tricks are not universal, like they're not magic that you can suddenly do it and you'll get the code. But once you think like that in terms of patterns, it becomes really easy to solve any pattern. So I'll be sharing that trick or that pattern on solving patterns tomorrow.
Will there be questions on LCM, GCF, HCF and all that? If yes, will you be explaining that in the subsequent webinars?
Alright, so thank you all for the suggestion. Yes, I can cover LCM and HCF also. I have not seen any question on LCM and HCF as such from NQT, but it's a very basic maths concept. So let's cover that. LCM and HCF, we will be covering that. It's a basic maths concept and we should be covering that. Basically what you should do is from your first semester C programming, whichever programs that you had, right, they have a very good chance of appearing in NQT. And so if you have doubts in any one of them, make sure that you put it in the comments and we'll consider them for the upcoming webinars.
Okay. When we write NQT Ninja, will everybody get the same question or will it be different questions?
So in NQT and TCS Ninja, does everybody get the same question or will it be different questions for different people? The answer is it will be different questions for different people. Now, not like there are about lakhs of people writing it, so they will not have 1 lakh different questions, but there will be different sets. So everybody will be getting same difficulty but different questions.
Are there any negative marks for not able to do the coding question?
So as far as we know, there is no negative marks for the coding questions. For the programming MCQs, there might be, because TCS just every year changes their MCQ pattern. So make sure you read the instructions properly. For the coding questions, nobody ever does negative marking. I highly doubt if TCS will also do that negative marking. There should not be any negative marking in the coding questions.
Okay, Vikram and Sanjay are asking 2 different questions. So Vikram is asking, will there be some questions on Palindrome series? And Sanjay is asking, are the bubble sort programs, and if at all, will you be covering them?
Okay, so I'll go with Vikram first.
Yes.
Okay.
Palindrome.
All right. So Vikram is asking whether there are questions on Palindrome or not. So one thing I just wanted to share was yes, there is. In fact, I think TCS in the previous years asked a palindrome. So we've covered this. In fact, it wasn't even a normal palindrome. It was like a number palindrome. So where what you're given in the question is you're given a number and you have to say whether that number is a palindrome or not. And we have a tutorial for this up on the Edyst platform. So if you just sign up for the Edyst platform, you'll get that tutorial as well. The other thing was the second question was
bubble sort.
So Sanjay is asking about bubble sort. Sanjay, if you go to warm up number 2, we have very specific videos about bubble sort, and so I'll just open that up. So we have very specific videos about bubble sort, selection sort, insertion sort, merge sort, quick sort, how you can understand them, and we explain it in a very different way, how you can understand them, how you can write the code for it, and code in every of the languages, C, C++, Java, Python. So that's in warm up number 2 if you're looking for a tutorial on that.
Will you be doing any videos on arrays as a topic?
Will we be doing any videos on arrays as a topic? I think after we cover some of the webinars on patterns, we will be doing a little bit of questions on arrays. But if you want to get that early and you want to get a deep introduction into arrays, again, warm up number 2, we have arrays. We have different questions on how you can take simple as inputting an integer array to all the way to what is how to find the first and the last element, and then distinct elements in an array. That's the most difficult question I have seen asked by any and that's not too difficult, but I'm just saying that's the higher level of array questions. So we have covered all of that already over here in the warm up number 2. Please go ahead and check it out.
What do we have access to in the free module, and if we don't pay for it, what do we miss out on?
Okay, so what do you have access to in the free module? So in the free module, what we have done is we have compiled the topics on how you can take input, how you can write certain functions and conditionals, and some very basic loops questions. So these loops questions are like on Fibonacci series, Lucas numbers, and how you can go ahead and solve these questions. So we've created the tutorials for them. We've created specifically in your language how you can do that. This is the free module. If you don't end up joining the entire course, what you miss out on is number one, all of the questions. We have more than 150 questions from the previously, asked questions from the previous companies. So there are about 150 plus questions. You'll miss out on that. What you also miss out on is, asking us, that is your mentors, questions, doubts, etc. So if you're just stuck on the first module, you will not get a chance to ask questions on all of these 150 plus questions as well.
Nani is asking, programming using functions is difficult. Will you explain that in this or some other?
Right. So Nani is asking about programming using functions. It's difficult. Nani, I know exactly what you mean, and that's exactly why in the third topic itself of the free module, we have something called methods. Please go and actually watch this warm-up methods this tutorial, and try to do some of these questions. Simple addition, product of two numbers. Read the tutorial also. If you still find it difficult after that, you can always reach out to me on the chat, and I'll help you out over there. But it's not too difficult. It's just you've not learned it in a different way. We teach it in a different way. Just watch the tutorials. It's a free tutorial. Go ahead and watch it, and you'll be able to do it. And really, the only methods and functions you need to know going into going into TCS Ninja is how to actually take input from methods. None of the questions will be so complicated that you have to write methods on your own. You will just have to fill in the blanks in methods. So if you just get a hang of that, then you should be good to go.
Two last questions. One, how do we prepare for MCQs? Will your module help us?
So how do we prepare for MCQs? Will it help us? Yes, the programming MCQs, we will have it up pretty soon, I think in a couple of days. So we will have all of the programming MCQs. You can go ahead and check that out. So for programming MCQs, you will definitely get a lot of help from the Edyst platform.
Okay. In fact, two very interesting questions. One, if I buy this pack and I don't clear TCS Ninja, will this pack be useful for anything else?
So if I buy this pack and I don't clear TCS Ninja, will it still be useful to me for everything else? Yes, it will be very much useful. That's why if you look down here, it's called Complete Coding Test and Interview Prep Pack. It's not an NQT pack as such. It has the questions from all of the major MNC recruiters, and it has all of the coding questions. And trust me, every MNC is now using the coding question as a disqualifier. That is, if you didn't get the coding question, like for example Ninja only, if you didn't get the coding question, 30 marks gone, you will not be able to clear the cutoff. So we've gathered the questions from all of the past years asked questions, that is Mindtree, Wipro, Infosys, whichever of these we've gathered all of them, and so 150 plus questions. So even if you don't clear Ninja, another company will come to your campus, practice for that, and then the other one, and then the next one, and I'm sure at least one company you will be able to get a placement.
Last question, what will you be covering tomorrow?
Alright, so the last question is, what am I going to cover tomorrow? And as our good friend Bino has suggested, we should be covering a pattern question. So we'll do a patterns question. We'll do two things specifically. We'll do a patterns question, but before we do that, the main thing that I want to cover is how you can analyze a patterns question. So what is it? What are the tricks of analyzing the patterns question? And again, there are different types of patterns questions. So I'll do one part. The other parts you can check on the Edyst platform, but I'll do one part of how you can analyze a patterns question, and we'll be doing that tomorrow. Right, so I think that was the last question. Thank you everybody for turning out. It's been really great to have you. If I think some of the people are having issues about accessing, just reach out to us on this email, team@edyst.com, or just WhatsApp us on this number. Our team is online. We are there to help you, so don't worry at all about that. Just reach us out on that part. And yes, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. As we get closer to Ninja, we'll be doing more and more such webinars, and you don't want to miss out on this. And again, as I keep saying, this channel is not only for TCS. We are going to do many webinars on the different campus drives that are happening. So if you are in your final year and preparing for campus drives, it's a must subscribe for you. Please subscribe to this channel so that you get all of the updates from all of the upcoming webinars, and do share with your friends. You don't want to get placed alone, you want to get placed with your friends. So share with your friends so that they also can watch, learn and enjoy. All right, thank you so much everybody for being part of the webinar. Great to have you here, and see you tomorrow at the same time for a patterns question from TCS Ninja NQT. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow.